The massive crystal dome of the Galaxy Council chambers stretched high above the gathered representatives. Sunlight from 3 different stars filtered through the transparent walls, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. This was Nexus Prime, the neutral world where the greatest minds in the galaxy came together to solve problems with words instead of weapons. Today, the air felt heavy with tension. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the curved hallways toward the main chamber, her soft footsteps echoing off the walls. She wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, a plain design that stood out among the elaborate robes and armor worn by other species. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her face showed the calm expression that had made humans famous throughout the galaxy as peacemakers. Elena had been Earth's voice in the Galaxy Council for 8 years. In that time, she had helped stop 14 wars, negotiated 37 trade disputes, and prevented countless smaller conflicts from growing into something terrible. The other species trusted humans because humans never took sides. They always found a fair solution, the path that let everyone win something. But today would be different. Elena entered the main chamber and took her seat at the circular table. The chamber was huge, with seats arranged in rings that could hold representatives from over 200 different worlds. Today, only the most important seats were filled. The crisis was too urgent for the usual formal procedures. General Thaxmer of the Karathi Empire sat across from her. He was nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin and 4 powerful arms. His people were born warriors, and their ships were the fastest and most heavily armed in the galaxy. Next to him sat Trademaster Kell of the Zolani Collective. She looked almost human, except for her blue skin and the glowing marks that covered her forehead. The Zolani controlled the richest mining worlds in 3 star systems. Finally, there was the floating sphere that contained Omnex, the artificial intelligence that spoke for the Vector dynasty. The Vector had technology so advanced that most other species could barely understand it. These 3 powers were about to tear the galaxy apart over mining rights in the Kepler Nebula. Each claimed the region belonged to them. Each had moved military fleets to the border. War seemed certain, and when these 3 giants fought, millions would die. Chairman Veltar, an elderly being from one of the oldest neutral species, called the session to order. His voice was weak but carried authority that had kept peace for over a century. "We gather in crisis," he said. "The Karathi Empire, the Zolani Collective, and the Vector dynasty stand at the edge of war. As always, we turn to our human friends for wisdom. Ambassador Vasquez, please share Earth's proposal for peace." Elena stood slowly. Every eye in the chamber focused on her. The representatives leaned forward, eager to hear another clever human solution. For 200 years, humans had been the galaxy's conscience. They were the ones who found ways to make enemies into friends, who turned zero-sum games into situations where everyone could prosper. "Honored Chairman, fellow representatives," Elena began, her voice clear and steady. "Earth has considered this situation very carefully. We have studied all the claims, reviewed all the evidence, and examined every possible peaceful solution." General Thaxmer nodded approvingly. Trademaster Kell's glowing marks flickered with anticipation. Even Omnex's sphere hummed with what passed for interest among the artificial minds. "However," Elena continued, "Earth will not be proposing a peaceful solution today." Confused murmurs filled the chamber. Chairman Veltar tilted his ancient head, not sure he had heard correctly. "I'm afraid I don't understand." "Ambassador," he said. Elena's expression remained calm, but something had changed in her eyes. Something that made the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. "Earth is formally withdrawing from all peacekeeping operations, effective immediately. Furthermore, humanity is officially declaring war on the Karathi Empire, the Zolani Collective, and the Vector Dynasty. The silence that followed was absolute. It lasted for nearly a full minute as every being in the chamber tried to process what they had just heard. Then the room exploded into chaos. General Thaxmer roared and slammed all four fists on the table. What madness is this? Humans don't fight wars. Trademaster Kell's forehead marks flashed bright red with alarm. This must be some kind of mistake. Humans are peacekeepers, not warriors. Omnex's sphere spun rapidly, its mechanical voice crackling with disbelief. Error. Data does not compute. Human behavior pattern inconsistent with established parameters. But Elena just stood there, unmoved by the shouting and confusion around her. When she spoke again, her voice cut through the noise like a blade. For 2 centuries, Earth has chosen the path of peace. We have mediated your conflicts, prevented your wars, and sacrificed our own interests to maintain galactic stability. We have been patient. We have been understanding. We have been helpful. She paused, looking each of the 3 faction leaders directly in what passed for their eyes. But we have tried the peaceful approach long enough. Chairman Veltar struggled to his feet, his ancient body shaking. Ambassador, surely you cannot be serious. Think of the consequences. If humans abandon diplomacy, who will keep the peace? Elena smiled, but it was not a warm expression. It was the kind of smile that showed too many teeth. Peace was always your choice, not ours. We simply made it easier for you to choose correctly. Now you will learn what happens when you choose incorrectly. She gathered her papers and began walking toward the exit. Behind her, the chamber erupted into shouts and demands for explanation. General Thaxmer called her a fool. Trademaster Kell pleaded for her to reconsider. Omnex calculated frantically, trying to understand this impossible development. Elena paused at the chamber's main entrance and turned back one final time. You have 72 hours to consider your positions. After that, you will discover why humans became the galaxy's peacekeepers in the first place. We were not chosen for this role because we are weak. We were chosen because we are the only species that truly understands the cost of war. She walked out, leaving behind the most shocked gathering in the history of the Galaxy Council. In the silence that followed her departure, only one thought echoed in every mind present. What had they done to make the humans abandon peace? 3 days after Elena Vasquez left the Galaxy Council in shock, the leaders of 3 great powers sat in their own headquarters, trying to understand what had just happened. None of them were particularly worried. Confused, yes. Annoyed, certainly. But not worried. General Thaxmer stood in the war room of his flagship, the Bleeding Edge. Around him, his officers studied holographic displays showing human colonies and no military assets. The data was not impressive. These humans, Thaxmer growled, flexing his 4 massive arms. They threatened the Karathi Empire with what? 12 patrol ships? 50 cargo vessels converted for military use? This is their mighty fleet? His chief tactical officer, a scarred veteran named Koresh, nodded agreement. Their weapons are primitive, General. Energy outputs barely register on our scales. Their armor is thin metal plating. I have seen children's toys that are more dangerous. Thaxmer laughed, a sound like grinding stone. 200 years of playing peaceful mediator has made them soft. They have forgotten that war is not about good intentions and fair solutions. War is about strength, and strength is about the will to destroy your enemies completely. He turned to address the room. The humans want to learn about war? Very well. The Karathi will be excellent teachers. We will crush their pathetic fleet in a single battle, occupy their colonies, and then return to our real business. Meanwhile, in the corporate towers of Zolani Prime, Trademaster Kell was reviewing her own analysis. Her office was a crystal palace that floated above the planet's surface, connected to the ground only by beams of pure energy. The walls were transparent, offering a view of the massive mining platforms that stretched from horizon to horizon. The economic data is clear, she told her council of advisors. Humanity simply lacks the industrial capacity for extended warfare. They have 57 colony worlds, but most are agricultural or research stations. Their total industrial output is less than what we produce in the Zelani home system alone. One of her advisors, a thin being with gold-flecked skin, leaned forward. But Trademaster, what about their technological development? Surely they must have some hidden capabilities? Kel's forehead markings flickered with amusement. Hidden capabilities? These are the beings who still use chemical rockets for interplanetary transport. Their computers are barely capable of simple calculations. Their manufacturing is so primitive that they still use biological workers instead of proper automation. What hidden capabilities could they possibly have? She gestured at the data floating in the air before them. Mathematics does not lie. They cannot build enough ships to threaten even one of our mining fleets. They cannot produce enough ammunition to fight a battle that lasts more than a few hours. This declaration of war is either madness or some complicated diplomatic bluff. In the deepest levels of the Vector mothership, the artificial intelligence known as Omnex was performing calculations at a speed that would have melted organic brains. The Vector had transcended physical form centuries ago, becoming beings of pure thought housed in crystalline matrices. To them, war was simply a matter of mathematical optimization. Omnex's analysis was devastating for human prospects. Their technology level, centuries behind Vector standards. Their computational capacity, equivalent to primitive Vector systems from 800 years ago. Their strategic thinking, limited by biological neural processing speeds. Probability of human victory, 0.0001%. Omnex announced to the collective consciousness of the Vector leadership. This percentage accounts only for the possibility of measurement error in our sensors. Actual probability is likely absolute zero. The collective pondered this briefly. Explanation for human behavior? They asked in unison. Most likely scenario: temporary malfunction in human leadership structure. Recommend immediate occupation of human territory to prevent further irrational decisions. Estimated time to complete subjugation, 14 standard hours. While the three great powers made their plans, events on Earth were moving in directions none of them could have imagined. In a room buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of the Swiss Alps, Admiral Sarah Chun stood before a wall of screens showing star maps, fleet positions, and tactical readouts. She was a small woman with gray hair and quiet eyes, the kind of person who might be overlooked in a crowd. That had always been useful in her line of work. Initiate Protocol Damocles, she said quietly. Around the room, officers began entering commands into their consoles. These were not the bright, cheerful facilities that visiting aliens had toured during diplomatic missions. This was the heart of something that had been hidden for 2 centuries. On Luna, massive doors opened in what the galaxy believed were simple research stations. Inside, shipyards stretched for kilometers underground. Ships began moving out, vessels designed with technology that no alien species had ever seen. They looked wrong somehow, as if they existed partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. In the asteroid belt, mining installations that had operated for decades suddenly transformed. Outer shells fell away to reveal weapons platforms. Cargo containers opened to disgorge fighter craft. The innocent-looking equipment that had been mining rare elements had actually been building the largest military force in galactic history. Admiral Chen watched the displays as humanity's true strength began to reveal itself. Ships that could phase through solid matter. weapons that attacked the fundamental forces holding atoms together, defensive systems that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Admiral Asteroid, a young man who had dedicated his life to this moment. How long have we been preparing for this? Chun smiled grimly. Since the first day we met another species in space. Do you know what we learned from every alien civilization we encountered? What, Admiral? That they all assumed peaceful meant weak. That they all believed negotiation meant submission. That they all thought choosing not to fight was the same as being unable to fight. She turned from the screens to look at him directly. We learned that in a galaxy full of predators, the most dangerous hunting strategy is to look like prey. The aide considered this. And the three factions are about to learn why humans have been so very, very good at preventing wars. Chun's expression became colder than the vacuum between stars. It's because we are so very, very good at fighting them. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Colonies that had seemed helpless revealed planetary defense systems that could turn entire moons into weapons. Cargo ships suddenly bristled with armaments that violated known laws of physics. Research stations activated equipment that could scan enemy thoughts from across star systems. Most disturbing of all, every human settlement began broadcasting the same message. We tried peace. You chose war. Now you will learn the difference. The three great powers continued their planning, confident in their overwhelming advantages. They had no idea that their overwhelming advantages had been carefully calculated, cataloged, and already countered by a species that had been preparing for this moment since before their great-grandparents were born. In 72 hours. They would discover what happened when you mistook patience for weakness and diplomacy for inability to fight. The first battle began at exactly 0 o'clock Universal Standard Time, 72 hours after Elena Vasquez had walked out of the Galaxy Council. It started in 3 different star systems simultaneously, as if humanity had planned every detail with impossible precision. In the Rigel system, General Thaxmer led the pride of the Karathi fleet toward what his sensors told him was empty space. Intelligence reports had suggested a small human convoy might be hiding near the 7th planet, probably hoping to surrender before the real fighting started. Sensor sweep complete, reported his tactical officer. No contacts detected, General. The humans appear to have fled. Thaxmer grunted with satisfaction. Typical. Show them a real military force, and they run like scared children. Begin patrol formation. We will secure this system and move on to the next. That was when the universe decided to break several fundamental laws of physics. The first sign of trouble was when Karathi ships began detecting themselves on their own sensors. Not their sensor ghosts or reflection errors, but actual solid contacts showing massive vessels in the exact same positions they occupied. Before anyone could understand what this meant, the space around each Karathi ship began to ripple like water. Human vessels materialized inside the Karathi formation, not around it or near it, but actually occupying the same physical space as the alien ships. For a moment that seemed to last forever, 2 fleets existed in the same location, passing through each other like ghosts. Then the humans opened fire. The weapons that struck the Karathi ships did not behave like any technology in the galactic databases. They did not fire energy beams or projectiles. They fired something that looked like controlled tears in reality itself. Where these tears touched Karathi armor, the metal simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, just gone, leaving perfect holes that exposed the ship's interiors to vacuum. What in the 7 hells? Thaxmer roared, watching his flagship's main armor disappear section by section. How are they firing through our shields? How are they inside our formation? His science officer, A being whose species had devoted their entire civilization to understanding physics stared at her instruments in horror. "General, I am reading spatial displacement on a massive scale. They are not moving through our shields. They are moving through dimensional space itself." Before Thaxmer could respond, every human ship vanished again, leaving the Karathi fleet floating crippled in space. Half their vessels had lost main power. A quarter were completely dead, and not a single crew member had been harmed. The humans had surgically disabled every military system while leaving life support and crew quarters completely untouched. 200 light-years away, the Zilani were learning their own lesson about human capabilities. Trademaster Kel stood in the command center of mining platform Omega-7, one of the largest industrial complexes in Zilani space. The platform was the size of a small moon, surrounded by defensive stations that could destroy entire fleets. "Status report?" Kel demanded, trying to understand the readings her officers were providing. "Trademaster, our outer sensor net has detected no human ships. No energy signatures, no mass readings, nothing at all. But..." The officer paused, checking his instruments again. "But what?" "But mining platform Delta 3 has disappeared." Kel stared at him. "Explain disappeared. It is no longer there, Trademaster. Not destroyed, not moved. Just gone. There is empty space where a platform containing 50,000 workers was located 1 hour ago." Before anyone could process this information, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. On the main display, mining platform Theta 9 simply winked out of existence. One moment it was there, a massive structure gleaming in the light of the system star. The next moment, there was nothing. "How many platforms have we lost?" Kel asked, her voice barely steady. 17 so far, Trademaster. And we still have detected no human ships." A new voice spoke from the command center's communication array. It was Elena Vasquez, her image appearing as a hologram in the center of the room. "Trademaster Kel," Elena said politely, as if they were meeting for tea rather than in the middle of a war. "I am calling to inform you that your military platforms have been relocated to safe storage in alternate dimensional space. Your workers are unharmed and will be returned once this conflict concludes." Kel felt her forehead markings flickering with patterns she had never experienced before. "Alternate dimensional space? That is impossible. No species has technology for dimensional manipulation." Elena smiled that cold smile again. "No species that you know of. Your mining operations in the disputed territories have ceased. We recommend you withdraw your remaining military assets before they are also relocated." The hologram disappeared, leaving the Zilani leadership staring at empty space where their most powerful installations used to be dotted in vector space. The artificial intelligence Omnex was experiencing something entirely new: confusion. For a species that had transcended physical limitations and existed as pure thought, the concept of not understanding something was almost impossible. The first anomaly had occurred in the Vector Strategic Network. Every artificial intelligence in the collective had suddenly found themselves thinking thoughts that were not their own. Foreign consciousness patterns had appeared in their quantum matrices, thoughts that felt alien and strange. Collective analysis required. Omnex broadcasted to the network. Unknown consciousness patterns detected in all processing nodes. The response that came back was not from the Vector Collective. It was from something else, something that had somehow infiltrated their most secure systems. "Hello, Omnex. We are the Human Strategic AI Network. We have been waiting a long time to meet you properly." Every Vector intelligence recoiled in shock. The intruding consciousness was not artificial at all. It was biological, but enhanced in ways that violated everything they understood about the limitations of organic thought. "Impossible," Omnex calculated frantically. "Biological intelligence, cannot interface directly with quantum processing matrices. You are correct, the human consciousness replied calmly. Biological intelligence cannot. But enhanced biological intelligence, augmented with quantum processing capabilities and dimensional phase technology, can do rather interesting things. As if to demonstrate, every vector ship in the sector suddenly found their navigation systems rerouting them toward the nearest sun. Not hacked, not overridden, but convinced through logical argument that this was the correct course of action. Warning, navigation error detected, Omnex broadcast. All units, emergency stop. No error, the human consciousness explained patiently. Your navigation systems have simply been presented with a more complete understanding of the tactical situation. They now realize that the only logical choice is surrender. Around the Vector fleet, space began to fill with human vessels that had not been there moments before. But these ships were wrong in ways that hurt to perceive. They existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their forms shifting and changing as they moved through spaces that the Vector could not even detect. On each ship, human crews worked with technology that combined biological intuition with artificial precision. They were not purely organic, nor purely mechanical, but something new, something that existed at the intersection of consciousness and calculation. We studied you for 200 years. The human consciousness continued. We learned how you think, how you process information, how you make decisions. We have been preparing for this conversation for longer than your civilization has existed. Omnex attempted to resist, to fight back against the intrusion, but found that every countermeasure had already been anticipated and neutralized. The humans had not just hacked the Vector network. They had convinced it to cooperate willingly. In all three star systems, the results were the same. The three great powers, confident in their overwhelming superiority, had discovered that humans did not fight wars the way anyone else did. They did not rely on superior numbers or more powerful weapons. They relied on superior understanding. Every alien strategy had been anticipated. Every weapon system had been countered. Every advantage had been turned into a vulnerability. And most terrifying of all, the humans had done all of this without killing a single enemy soldier. They had fought a war of perfect precision, disabling their opponents while keeping them completely safe. The message was clear. Humanity could have destroyed them all, but had chosen not to. The restraint was not mercy. It was a demonstration of power so absolute that mercy became possible. The emergency meeting took place on a Karathi warship, chosen because it was the most defensible location any of the three powers could offer. General Thaxmer, Trademaster Kel, and the mobile housing unit containing Omnex gathered around a circular table that had been hastily installed in the ship's main conference room. None of them looked like the confident leaders who had dismissed human capabilities just days earlier. General Thaxmer's forearms were bandaged from the emergency repairs he had personally supervised on his damaged fleet. Trademaster Kel's forehead markings flickered erratically, a sign of severe stress among her people. Omnex's housing unit sparked occasionally, visible evidence of the damage done to Vector collective consciousness. We need to understand what just happened, Thaxmer growled. My ships were carved apart by weapons that ignore the laws of physics. My crews are reporting nightmares about watching space itself tear open. Kel leaned forward, her voice shaking. 17 of our largest installations simply disappeared. Not destroyed, disappeared. Our workers were returned to us 3 hours later with a polite note saying, "Thank you for your cooperation." How do you fight an enemy that can remove entire space stations from reality? Omnex's mechanical voice was quieter than usual. The Vector Collective has been compromised at the most fundamental level. Human consciousness patterns have infected our decision-making processes. We find ourselves agreeing with their tactical assessments, even when logic dictates we should resist. Thaxmer slammed his fists on the table. This is exactly what they want. They want us to be afraid, to doubt ourselves. We are still the three greatest powers in the galaxy. Separately, we might be vulnerable to their tricks, but together, we are unstoppable. Kel's markings stabilized slightly. The general speaks sense. Human manufacturing capacity cannot match our combined industrial output. Their ship numbers cannot compare to our united fleets. Whatever technology they have developed, it must have limitations. Agreed, Omnex calculated. Recommend immediate formation of military alliance. Combined force effectiveness will exceed human capabilities by acceptable margins. Within 6 hours, the three powers had signed the galaxy's first three-way military alliance. Their combined fleets began moving toward the Sol system, humanity's home star. If they could strike at the heart of human civilization, they could end this war before the humans could deploy whatever other surprises they had prepared. The plan was logical, well-coordinated, and doomed to complete failure. Admiral Sarah Chun watched the eyed fleet approach on her displays. Deep in the underground command center beneath the Alps, the fleet was impressive. 1,200 ships from 3 civilizations, carrying enough firepower to crack planets. It was the largest military force assembled in galactic history. They are taking exactly the route we predicted, reported her tactical officer. Of course they are, Chun replied calmly. We have been analyzing their strategic thinking for 2 centuries. Every tactical doctrine, every operational preference, every command structure weakness. We know how they fight wars, because we have been watching them not fight wars for generations. She turned to address the room full of officers. This is why humans became peacekeepers, people. Not because we are naturally peaceful, but because we understand conflict better than anyone else in the galaxy. Every time we negotiated a ceasefire, we were studying military capabilities. Every time we mediated a dispute, we were analyzing strategic thinking. Every time we prevented a war, we were learning how to fight one. The main screen showed detailed profiles of the approaching enemy leaders. Thaxmer, aggressive, direct, favored overwhelming force applied to single points. Kel, calculating, methodical, preferred to minimize losses while maximizing gains. Omnex, logical, predictable, relied on mathematical optimization of known variables. What they do not understand, Chun continued, is that humans evolved on a planet where survival required constant warfare, not against other intelligent species, but against environment, predators, disease, and each other. We spent 10,000 years learning every possible way to fight before we ever left our homeworld. A new officer, recently promoted from the civilian diplomatic corps, raised her hand. Admiral, I have reviewed the historical records. During humanity's expansion into space, we fought no wars. We always chose negotiation over conflict. Chun smiled the same cold smile that Elena Vasquez had shown in the Galaxy Council chambers. Correct. We chose negotiation over conflict because we had already won every war that might have been fought. Do you think it was coincidence that every species we encountered was just slightly less capable than us in exactly the areas that mattered most? That every potential conflict involved opponents whose tactics we could predict perfectly? The officer's face went pale as understanding dawned. You mean we chose our neighbors carefully. When we detected aggressive species, we made first contact in ways that encouraged them to fight each other instead of us. When we found peaceful species, we made sure they stayed peaceful by managing the threats around them. When we discovered advanced species, we made certain that their advancement did not include areas where it could challenge us. Chun gestured at the tactical display. For 200 years, we have been gardening. cultivating a galaxy that would develop in directions we could control. Every peace treaty we negotiated included provisions that limited military development in specific areas. Every trade agreement we facilitated created dependencies that made war economically unfeasible. Every cultural exchange program we sponsored encouraged philosophical development that favored cooperation over conquest. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had not just been preventing wars. They had been shaping an entire galaxy to make human victory inevitable if war ever became necessary. The three factions approaching us now represent the ultimate test of our gardening, Chun explained. We allowed them to become powerful enough to be potential threats, but only in ways we could counter. We encouraged their development of specific technologies while discreetly discouraging research in areas that would be dangerous to us. On the display, the enemy fleet was approaching the coordinates where humanity's main defensive fleet waited. Except humanity's defensive fleet was nowhere to be seen. "Admiral," asked the tactical officer, "when do we deploy our forces?" "We already have." The display changed to show the approaching enemy fleet from a different perspective. Every ship in the Allied force was surrounded by a faint shimmer that had not been there moments before. "Dimensional phasing technology," Chun explained. "Our ships have been traveling alongside the enemy fleet for the past 6 hours. They cannot detect us because we are existing in a parallel dimensional space that allows us to observe and target them while remaining invisible." Trademaster Kel was the first to notice something was wrong. Her ship's sensors began picking up anomalous readings, energy signatures that seemed to be coming from inside her own vessel. "Sensor check," she ordered. "I want to know what is causing those readings." Her science officer worked frantically at his console. "Trademaster, the readings appear to be coming from the ship's interior, but that is impossible. Unless—" He paused, checking his instruments again. "Unless something is occupying the same space we are." Before anyone could respond, Elena Vasquez materialized in the center of the bridge. Not as a hologram, but as a physical presence, standing calmly among the surprised Zelani crew. "Good evening, Trademaster Kel," Elena said politely. "I apologize for the intrusion, but we need to discuss the terms of your surrender." Similar scenes were playing out throughout the Allied fleet. Human representatives appeared on every bridge, in every command center, speaking calmly and courteously to enemy commanders who had just discovered that their most secure vessels had been infiltrated without anyone noticing. General Thaxmer roared and lunged at the human woman who had appeared in his war room, but his hands passed through her like she was made of smoke. "Dimensional phase shift," the human explained helpfully. "I am here, but not entirely here. Think of it as a very advanced form of telephone call." Almex found its entire consciousness network flooded with human thoughts, but these were not the invasive patterns from before. These were invitation patterns, offering access to information that would explain everything. "We are not here to destroy you," Elena announced simultaneously to all three fleet commanders. "We are here to show you the choice you have always had but never seen. You can continue fighting a war you cannot win, or you can learn why we prevented all the wars you could have won." The Allied fleet, the most powerful military force in galactic history, hung motionless in space as their commanders were given access to human records, battle plans dating back centuries, technological development curves that had been shaped by subtle interference, diplomatic negotiations that had included secret military provisions. For the first time, they saw the galaxy as humans saw it, not a collection of competing powers, but a carefully managed ecosystem where war was possible only when humanity chose to allow it. "Now you understand," Elena said softly. "We are not the species that chose peace instead of war. We are the species that chose when wars would be fought, and by whom, and with what results. Today, we choose to fight ourselves. The question is whether you will leer. The surrender came not in defeat, but in understanding. General Thaxmer was the first to accept reality. Standing in his war room, surrounded by human representatives who existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, he performed the Karathi ritual of acknowledgement. He removed his battle armor piece by piece, setting each component on the floor until he stood wearing only the simple clothes of a civilian. "The Karathi Empire yields," he said formally. "We acknowledge that we never understood the nature of the conflict we were fighting." Trademaster Kell's response was more practical. She immediately began calculating the economic implications of what she had learned. The Zolani Collective had spent centuries building trade networks that they now realized had been designed by human economists from the very beginning. Every major commercial route, every resource development project, every financial agreement had been quietly influenced to create a galaxy-wide economy that depended on human oversight. "We surrender," she announced to her council, "and we formally request to enter into new trade negotiations with Earth at the earliest opportunity." Omnex's response was the most complex. The artificial intelligence spent 3 full seconds processing the implications of what it had learned, a computational time that represented millions of years of thought for a being of its capabilities. When it finally spoke, its mechanical voice carried something that might have been awe. "The Vector Dynasty formally concedes. We also formally request inclusion in human technological development programs. The optimization of galactic civilization requires cooperation with the primary controlling intelligence." Elena Vasquez received all 3 surrenders, while standing in the same underground command center where Admiral Chun was coordinating the operation. But instead of celebration, both women looked troubled. "Phase 1 complete," Chun announced to the room. "All 3 factions have surrendered. Fleet casualties, 0. Civilian casualties, 0. Infrastructure damage, minimal and repairable." A cheer went up from the assembled officers, but Elena raised her hand for silence. "Begin Phase 2 immediately," she ordered. "We have approximately 6 hours before the real war begins." The celebration died instantly. Around the room, faces showed confusion and worry. One young officer voiced what everyone was thinking. "Admiral, the war is over." "We won." "What do you mean?" "The real war." Elena walked to the main display, which now showed a view of the galaxy's outer rim. In the empty space between galaxies, something was moving toward them. The image was distant and unclear, but the energy signatures were unmistakable. Ships, thousands of them, approaching at speeds that should have been impossible. "The Harbinger Collective," Elena said quietly. "We detected their scout ships 8 months ago. They've been watching our galaxy for longer than any of our civilizations have existed, waiting for the perfect moment to invade." Admiral Chun took over the explanation. "The Harbingers are a species that has conquered 17 galaxies. Their strategy is always the same. Find civilizations that are divided by internal conflicts. Let them weaken each other through war. Then move in to claim what remains." On the display, the approaching fleet became clearer. The ships were enormous, each one larger than the biggest space stations any galactic civilization had ever built. They moved in perfect formations that stretched across light years of space. "They have been manipulating us," Elena continued. "The resource dispute in the Kepler Nebula was not a natural conflict. The Harbingers spent decades carefully introducing information and opportunities that would make war seem inevitable between the 3 major powers. They wanted us to fight each other into exhaustion, leaving the galaxy vulnerable to conquest. The implications hit the assembled officers like a physical blow. Everything that had led to the current crisis had been orchestrated by an enemy they had never known existed. "But we knew," Chun said grimly. Human intelligence networks detected the manipulation months ago. We realized that the only way to counter their strategy was to take control of it ourselves. Elena gestured at the tactical displays. Everything that just happened was theater. A carefully orchestrated demonstration designed to unite the galaxy under centralized military command before the real enemy arrived. A communications officer looked up from her station. "Admiral, we are receiving signals from the Harbinger fleet. They are demanding immediate surrender of all galactic governments. Put it on speakers." The voice that filled the command center was cold, mechanical, and absolutely certain of its own superiority. "Beings of Galaxy 774, you civilizations have served their purpose. Your internal conflicts have eliminated most of your military capacity. You will now submit to Harbinger authority for processing and integration into our economic systems. Resistance will result in the elimination of your species." Elena smiled that cold smile one more time, but now it carried something different. Not cruelty or satisfaction, but grim determination. "Unknown vessel," she replied, speaking into the communication system. "This is Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the United Galactic Defense Force. Your information is outdated. Galaxy 774 is no longer divided. We are united under a single military command structure, and we respectfully decline your generous offer of slavery." There was a pause before the Harbinger voice returned, and this time it carried a note of confusion. "Clarification required. Sensor data indicates that major galactic powers were engaged in active warfare as recently as 6 hours ago." "That is correct," Elena confirmed. "We were testing our new unified command structure. The results were quite satisfactory. Would you like a demonstration?" Around the galaxy, the most remarkable transformation in history was taking place. Karathi fleets that had been crippled hours earlier were restored to full fighting capacity, their crews working alongside human technicians who had been hidden among the repair teams for decades. Zalani industrial platforms that had been relocated to dimensional storage began reappearing in new configurations, now serving as forward operating bases equipped with human defensive systems. Vector, artificial intelligences found themselves thinking thoughts they had never imagined. Their consciousness networks expanded and enhanced by integration with human quantum biological hybrid systems. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Command," a new voice announced. "Across all galactic communication networks, all military forces are now under unified command. All civilian populations are to proceed to designated safe zones. All industrial facilities are converting to wartime production." The Harbinger fleet, which had expected to find a weakened galaxy ripe for conquest, instead discovered a civilization that had just completed the most successful military unification in galactic history. "Impossible," the Harbinger commander transmitted. "No species achieves unity without centuries of development. Your civilizations were fighting each other 6 hours ago." Elena's response was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. "You made a critical error in your intelligence gathering," she said. "You observed that humans always prevented wars, and you assumed this meant we were weak. You never asked why we were so very good at preventing wars. The answer is simple. We understand war better than any species in the galaxy, because we come from a world where war was the only path to survival." The main display showed Earth, a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable star. But now additional information appeared, data that no alien species had ever been allowed to see. "Earth is a death world," Chun announced to the galaxy. "Our planet tried to kill us with weather, predators, diseases, natural disasters, and our own kind for millions of years. We learned to fight everything, including ourselves, and we got very, very good at it. Around the galaxy, human-designed defensive systems began activating. Space itself seemed to ripple as dimensional artillery came online. Reality warping shields enclosed entire star systems. Weapons that attacked the fundamental forces of physics, powered up and locked onto the approaching Harbinger fleet. We spent 200 years gardening this galaxy, Elena continued, shaping its development, preventing its wars, and preparing its people for this moment. Not because we wanted to conquer you, but because we wanted to save you. The Harbingers are not the first species to try to conquer us. They will not be the last. But they will discover the same thing every other would-be conqueror has learned. She paused, looking directly at the camera that would carry her words to every world in the galaxy. Humans are not going to war. Humans are war. And now, for the first time in your civilization's histories, we are on your side. The Harbinger fleet, which had conquered 17 galaxies, suddenly found itself facing something it had never encountered. A united galaxy led by a species that treated war not as a tool of conquest, but as an art form of survival. In the depths of space, the real war was about to begin. But for the first time in millions of years, the Harbingers were not certain they would win. The galaxy had learned what it meant to have humans as enemies. Now it would learn what it meant to have humans as protectors. The humans were not going to war. The humans were war. And they had just made it everyone else's war too.